There have been things that have been showing up in my life, and principles for me to write about, and things for me to tell you and share with you that have really surprised me. And I've always lived by the principle of Talopa, the 10th century Sufi master, who said, have a mind that is open to everything and attached nowhere, attached to nothing. And my wife and I always had this attitude in bringing up our children, that keep an open mind, and anything that you immediately reject, get your ego out of that, and just open yourself to the words of Jesus in the New Testament when he said, with God, all things are possible. And I always ask my audience, what does that leave out? What does all things are possible leave out? And obviously the answer is nothing. In the book that I wrote for the film, The Shift, it is also called The Shift, it has 4 chapters. From ambition to meaning. Moving our lives away from our egos and into a place of meaning. What Serena was up here speaking about. It's a sense of feeling that you're making a difference in the world. And towards the end of that book, I quoted from a man named Joel Goldsmith, who wrote The Infinite Way, in parentheses, in eternity. And we actually had friends on Maui, a friend on Maui named Alexandra, who was in her 90s, and in her late 80s, she would go out kayaking every day. And she actually dated Joel Goldsmith back in the 1950s when he lived on Hawaii. He's been very much of a hero to me. And then from his book, Parentheses in Eternity, which is what your life is, a parentheses in eternity, he said these words. He said, then there are those who reach a stage in which they realize the futility of this constant striving and struggling for the things that perish, things which after they are obtained prove to be shadows. It is at this stage that some persons turn from this seeking for things in the outer realm to a seeking for them from God. And that has been probably the major shift in my life, taking the focus in my life off of the things, the accomplishments, the acquisitions, reputation, ownership, which we begin to identify ourselves as, and to begin to recognize that Pierre Teilhard, the great French priest who was excommunicated from the Catholic Church for his outrageous ideas in 1918, he said, you're not here as a human being having a spiritual experience, that it's the other way around. And you've all heard it, that we are all infinite spiritual beings having a temporary human experience, and beginning to live our life from this spiritual place, its place of spirit, where we recognize and identify ourselves not on the basis of what the ego says, which is on the basis of what we have and what we accomplish, what we own, and what others think of us, not based on our belief in our separation from each other, and most egregiously, not based upon our belief in our separation from God. A shift, if you will, to an awareness of our own divinity. And from that place, what is possible for all of us. So I'm going to recite a poem here from a great poet. His name was Samuel Taylor Coleridge. He wrote a poem called The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. And he also wrote one that wasn't that well known. I put it in a book of mine years ago called Real Magic. I started it with this. And I'd like you to, as I give these words, I'd like you to think about what the poet is asking, and whether or not you believe in your heart or know in your heart that what the poet is saying is possible for you. or whether you think it's just the fancy kind of fanciful meanderings and dreamings of an idealist. Ask yourself, is this possible? He said, what if you slept? And what if in your sleep you dreamed? And what if in your dream you went to heaven and there picked a strange and wonderful flower? And what if, when you awoke, you held that flower in your hand? Ah, what then? He concludes his poem. Ah, what then? And I wonder if you think such a thing is really a possibility. That you can go into a state in which there is no form, no beginnings, no ends, no boundaries, no limits, and bring from that invisible place something that has substance, that has boundaries, that has form, that you can hold, that you can smell. And then ask yourself if that's a possibility. I wonder how many of you think yes, and how many of you think no. I'm not going to ask, but the fact is that this room has, it looks like 2,500 or so people in the room tonight. Every single one of you are an example of what that poet just described. Every single one of you came from a formless place and are now formed. All of you. Every flower that you look at began in a seed, and the seed began in something that is invisible. There's a little girl here tonight. Camille, where's Camille? 6 years old or so, 7 years old. I was swimming with her a little while ago, and she showed me her teeth. And she said, I lost 2 of my teeth. And look, there's 2 new teeth coming underneath it, and she was all excited about that. And I said to her mom and my daughter Summer, who was here, just imagine that in that tiny little infinitesimally small little speck that built into that was what she's going through right now. What is there to do? There's nothing for us to, we can't make a change. In that tiny little invisible speck, everything that you needed for this physical journey was handed for you. And you don't believe in miracles? In the great Tao, many of you know I lived the Tao for a year. The year I turned 65 and wrote a book on it. A book that I always tell people, carry it with you wherever you go. Some call it the wisest book ever written. And I lived the principles of that little book. And I encourage people to just stick it in your new purse. The ones that are made out of plastic, recycled water bottles. Is that all right? And, but just carry it with you, because you don't even really need to open it, because the energy from what's in here will come to you. I had a great teacher in India who used to say, he wrote a collection of his writings was called I Am That by Nisargadatta Maharaj. And he used to say to his devotees, you don't have to read it, just carry it with you. And I heard that, I was in my early 40s when I heard that, and I just thought, this is just another one of those crazy guys over there in India giving us advice. And I just didn't think that it would be possible to get. But now I've really come to an awareness that energy is in everything. and that just holding this book, literally, you could muscle test this, kinesiology, and put this thing next to your heart, and you will be stronger with it than you were without it. Just try it. Just carry it with you.